Hey, welcome. So today, we're going to unpack a decision the Federal Reserve made recently. Now, on the surface, it might look like just another day at the office for them, but it's actually kicked off this huge debate about how our economy should really be run. Let's get into it.
All right, so picture this. It's September 2025, and the Fed's main committee, the FOMC, does what it often does. It cuts interest rates. You've seen the headlines before, right? But this time, that seemingly standard move has stirred up a major conversation. It's like it's pulled back the curtain on this fundamental clash of ideas right at the heart of the world's most powerful central bank. So naturally, when Fed Chair Powell was asked about it, he gave the classic answer. He said, look, we go meeting by meeting, we look at the data, we weigh our two big jobs, stable prices and full employment, and we make a judgment call. Sounds simple enough, doesn't it? Well, that's the simple story. But what if I told you the real story? The one that makes this so controversial, actually started years ago.
Okay, so that brings us to Section 1. Let's really ask the question, was this actually a standard rate cut?
Yeah, not exactly. You see, to really get why this 2025 decision is such a big deal, we can't just look at today's numbers. The real story began a while back with a major change to the Fed's own playbook, a shift away from predictable rules to something a lot more flexible, and, as some people are arguing, a lot more unpredictable. So let's get into Section 2, where the real story starts to unfold. The key to this entire debate, believe it or not, comes down to one single document. Think of it as the Fed's North Star.
And that document is called the Consensus Statement. You can just think of it as the Fed's navigation chart. Seriously, it's the map that's supposed to tell everybody, you, me, the markets, Congress, exactly how the Fed plans to steer the massive ship of the U.S. economy, whether the water is calm or super choppy.
Which leads us to our third section, a shift in Fed policy. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because that navigation chart we just talked about, well, it's been redrawn. Let's take a look at how the Fed's core strategy has actually changed over time. So the first version of this modern-day map was drawn up back in 2012. And for years, it gave a pretty clear path. But then in 2020, they revised it in a really significant way, fundamentally changing how the Fed saw its job. And that brings us right up to that 2025 rate cut, which was really the first big test of this new philosophy. And you guessed it, the source of all this controversy. And this slide, wow, it really lays it all out. The 2012 version was all about having clear, predictable rules so markets knew what to expect. The big goal was long-term price stability. But the 2020 rewrite? It flipped the script. The new framework is all about flexibility and discretion. The new focus is on addressing shortfalls from maximum employment. In other words, they've basically gone from a fixed rulebook to making real-time judgment calls.
Okay, next up, Section 4, the Fed under fire. Now, you can imagine that a major internal shift like this didn't just happen in a quiet little room. It's created some very real pressure from the outside world, raising the stakes for the central bank in a big way.
And here's the thing, when you move away from a clear set of rules and toward a more, we'll know it when we see it kind of approach, it can make you a target. It's just a lot harder for the Fed to explain its decisions and, crucially, to defend its independence from political chatter.
And that's not just a theory. It's exactly what's been happening. You've got public criticism coming from powerful people like Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. When the Fed's game plan looks fuzzy, it just opens the door for politicians to question their every move and try to apply pressure, which is a direct threat to the Fed's independence. That's a big deal. So, if this new, flexible approach is causing these kinds of problems, what's the alternative? Let's dive into our final section, a call for clarity, and look at a proposal from a retired senior Fed economist, Robert Hetzel.
Hetzel's argument is actually pretty simple. He says that to protect itself and the economy, the Fed needs to get back to basics. He's making the case that the central bank needs a much clearer, more consistent framework. Basically, a return to a rules-based approach that everyone can understand and pretty much predict.
Now, the heart of his idea is something called a stable nominal anchor. I know it sounds super technical, but the idea is actually quite simple. It's just a clear, believable, long-term goal, like a rock-solid inflation target, that acts as an anchor for the whole economy. When people and businesses really trust that the Fed is committed to that anchor, it keeps everyone's expectations about prices nice and stable. It's basically the ultimate rule for the rulebook.
So the benefits of having this kind of clarity are huge, and they go way beyond just economics. A clear framework helps the markets anticipate what the Fed's going to do next. It gives the Fed a shield against political meddling. It ensures long-term stability. And maybe most importantly, it helps the public actually understand what the Fed is doing and why, which is absolutely essential for rebuilding trust.
And that leaves us with the billion-dollar question, doesn't it? In an economy that's always throwing us curveballs, what's more valuable? A predictable rulebook that creates stability and guards against politics, or the flexible, on-the-fly discretion of human judgment? There's no easy answer, but it's a question that is absolutely going to shape our economic future.